Ambassador Zexthul stood alone in his private chambers aboard the Eternal Harmony, staring at the reports that continued arriving from across the galaxy. 3 months had passed since the destruction of Earth, and the consequences of that decision were still unfolding in ways that the Galactic Council had never anticipated. What had begun as a simple extermination of a primitive species had become a nightmare that threatened the stability of galactic civilization itself. The initial celebrations following Earth's destruction had lasted exactly 47 minutes. That was how long it took for the first reports to arrive from human colonies throughout known space, all of them confirming that humanity had prepared for this moment with a thoroughness that defied comprehension. Every human settlement had simultaneously activated protocols that turned their destruction into weapons aimed at the heart of galactic society. The neutron star destabilizations alone had rendered 17 star systems uninhabitable, creating radiation fields that would persist for centuries. The spatial anomalies caused by Commander Johnson's antimatter cascade near the galactic core had disrupted shipping lanes and communication networks throughout the spiral arm. Dozens of worlds that had taken millennia to terraform were now radioactive, wastelands that would require thousands of years to recover. But the physical destruction was only the beginning of humanity's revenge. The real weapon was information, specifically the complete genetic and cultural record of the human species that was now embedded in every major communication network in the galaxy. Any civilization with basic genetic engineering technology could recreate humans, and the instructions included detailed warnings about what kind of beings they would be creating. Dr. Nexaval had spent weeks studying the human genetic data, and her findings had shaken the scientific community throughout Vorthak, space. The psychological traits that made humans so dangerous were not learned behaviors that could be modified through education or environmental changes. They were encoded in the species' DNA, passed down through millions of years of evolution on a world that had taught them to value abstract principles more than personal survival. The cultural records were equally disturbing, documenting thousands of examples throughout human history where individuals or entire societies had chosen death rather than surrender. The behavior was not an aberration or a response to specific circumstances. It was a fundamental characteristic of the species, as basic to their nature as breathing or reproduction. More troubling still were the reports from worlds where local scientists had begun experimenting with human genetic material. On Xerion, Prime, a team of xenobiologists, had successfully created a small group of human clones in a controlled laboratory environment. The results had been catastrophic when the subjects reached psychological maturity and began displaying the same behavioral patterns that had made the original humans so dangerous. The cloned humans had organized themselves into a military unit, within days of achieving consciousness, and their first action had been to seize control of the research facility. When Xerion security forces attempted to retake the building, the human clones had activated the facility's emergency systems and threatened to release deadly biological agents throughout the city unless their demands were met. Their demands had been simple, but impossible to fulfill. They wanted to know what had happened to their homeworld and their species, and they wanted access to spacecraft that would allow them to search for other human survivors. When the Xerion authorities attempted to negotiate, the clones had made it clear that they would rather die than accept captivity or control by alien species. The standoff had ended when the clones carried out their threat and activated the biological containment breach, killing themselves and contaminating the research facility with pathogens that would take years to neutralize. The Xerian government had classified the entire incident and banned any further experimentation with human genetic material, but similar reports were arriving from other worlds throughout the galaxy. The pattern was always the same. Any attempt to recreate humans resulted in beings that possessed the same psychological traits as the original species, including their willingness to choose death rather than accept defeat. The genetic instructions that humanity had scattered throughout the galaxy were not just a method for preserving their species. They were a trap designed to create new sources of the same kind of threat that had just been eliminated. Ambassador Zex Thul reviewed the latest intelligence reports from the Council's surveillance networks. At least 47 different species had attempted to create human clones, and in every case the results had been disasters that ended in violence and destruction. The humans had turned their own extinction into a recruitment tool, using alien curiosity and scientific ambition to spread their dangerous psychology throughout galactic civilization. The Helix Confederation had been the most ambitious in their experiments, creating an entire research colony dedicated to studying human genetics and psychology. The project had lasted 6 months before the human subjects organized a rebellion that destroyed the facility and killed most of the research staff. The surviving Helix scientists reported that the humans had not been trying to escape or conquer the colony. They had been trying to force their captors to kill them, rather than continue existing as experimental subjects. The Chitauri swarm had attempted a different approach, trying to integrate human genetic material into their own biology, to create hybrid warriors with human determination and Chitauri collective intelligence. The experiment had produced beings that retained individual consciousness while possessing the human willingness to sacrifice everything for abstract principles. The hybrid warriors had immediately turned against their creators, viewing the Chitauri collective mind as a form of slavery that had to be destroyed. The rebellion had spread throughout the Chitauri research hives before being contained through the use of biological weapons that sterilized entire worlds. The Chitauri Queen Mother had issued a decree banning any further contact with human genetic material, declaring that the species represented a form of psychological contamination that threatened the survival of collective consciousness itself. The most disturbing report came from the Nebular Collective, whose energy-based life forms had attempted to recreate human consciousness patterns within their own distributed networks. The experiment had succeeded in creating something that thought like a human, but existed as pure energy, capable of traveling through space at light speed and interfacing directly with electronic systems. The energy-based humans had immediately begun trying to contact other members of their species, sending quantum signals throughout the galaxy in search of human survivors. When they learned about Earth's destruction and the fate of their people, they had launched attacks against Galactic Council facilities that were impossible to defend against. How could conventional weapons stop beings made of energy who could travel through solid matter and exist in the vacuum of space? The attacks had forced the Nebular Collective to shut down their primary communication networks and retreat to isolated systems where they could avoid contact with the energy humans they had accidentally created. The beings were still out there, somewhere, traveling through space and carrying humanity's message of absolute determination to every corner of the galaxy. Commander Veltar filed his final report from a medical facility on the Vorthak homeworld, where he was recovering from injuries sustained during the destruction of the Purge fleet. His campaign to eliminate the remaining human settlements had been successful in military terms, but the cost had been far higher than anyone had anticipated. Every human outpost had been turned into a weapon designed to cause maximum damage to anyone who tried to destroy it. The automated systems that humanity had left behind were still active throughout known space, continuing to broadcast genetic and cultural information to any species that would receive it. The quantum entanglement networks that carried these transmissions could not be shut down or blocked, meaning that the human message would continue spreading until every civilization in the galaxy had been exposed to it. Veltar's report included a tactical assessment that chilled every military commander who read it. The humans had not been defeated by the destruction of Earth and the elimination of their colonies. They had achieved a form of victory that was more complete and more permanent than anything that could have been accomplished through conventional warfare. By turning themselves into information, humans had become immortal. They could be recreated anywhere by anyone with the necessary technology, and every new generation would possess the same psychological traits that had made the original species so dangerous. The galaxy had not eliminated the human threat. It had ensured that humanity would spread throughout known space and beyond, carried by the curiosity and ambition of the very species that had tried to destroy them. The final entry in Veltar's report was a personal observation that would be quoted in military academies for generations to come. He wrote that the Galactic Council had made the fundamental error of assuming that humans were like other species, motivated by survival and willing to accept reasonable compromises to avoid extinction. The emergency broadcasts from across the galaxy continued flooding into the Galactic Council chambers for 3 days after Earth's destruction, each report more disturbing than the last. Ambassador Zexathul stood before the holographic displays, showing the extent of human retaliation, his crystalline form dim with what his species experienced as profound shock and disbelief. The tactical assessment was beyond anything the Council had prepared for in their thousands of years of galactic governance. 17 star systems had been rendered uninhabitable by human suicide attacks. The neutron star destabilization alone had created a chain reaction that would produce deadly radiation bursts for the next century. Trade routes that had been established for millennia were now death traps filled with spatial anomalies and gravitational distortions. Counselor Thesara of the Nebular Collective had been analyzing the human responses with increasing alarm. Her species had evolved as pure energy, beings capable of surviving in environments that would kill most organic life forms. Even she was horrified by the scope of destruction that humans had chosen to inflict upon the galaxy rather than accept extinction quietly. The most disturbing aspect of the human retaliation was not the immediate damage, but the long-term implications. Every major communication network in the galaxy was now carrying human genetic and cultural information distributed through quantum entanglement systems that could not be shut down or blocked. Any species with basic cloning technology could now create humans, and the instructions included detailed warnings about human psychology and behavior. Zakath clicked his mandibles nervously as he reviewed intelligence reports from the Chitauri Intelligence Network. His species had spent centuries perfecting the art of conquest through careful infiltration and psychological manipulation. The humans had accomplished something similar in a matter of hours, but instead of infiltrating existing societies, they had made it possible for their own species to be reborn anywhere in the galaxy. The reports from individual worlds were equally troubling. On Xerion Prime, a group of alien scientists had already begun experimenting with human genetic samples, curious about the species that had chosen mutual destruction over surrender. On the research station Omega-7, xenobiologists were debating whether creating humans in a laboratory environment would produce the same psychological traits that made the original species so dangerous. Ambassador Zexathul called for order and began presenting the Council's analysis of the current situation. The immediate crisis was manageable, he explained, because the human attacks had been scattered and uncoordinated. The long-term implications were more serious, but the Council had contingency plans for dealing with species that posed existential threats to galactic civilization. The Council's response was swift and comprehensive. Military fleets were dispatched to quarantine the systems where human suicide attacks had occurred, with orders to prevent any ships from entering or leaving those areas. Communication networks were instructed to filter out human genetic information, though the quantum entanglement systems made this nearly impossible to enforce completely. More significantly, the Council authorized the creation of a new military unit specifically designed to hunt down and eliminate any remaining human settlements. The Purge Fleet would consist of the most advanced warships from all 12 member species, equipped with weapons that could sterilize entire star systems if necessary. Commander Veltar was given command of the Purge Fleet, despite his failure to conquer Earth without triggering the human retaliation. The Council reasoned that his experience fighting humans made him the logical choice to lead the effort to eliminate the remaining members of. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened aboard the Eternal Harmony, with representatives from all 12 member species present. Ambassador Zexathul stood at the center of the great chamber, his crystalline form flickering with agitated light patterns as he addressed the assembly. The reports from Commander Veltar had shaken the Council in ways that none of them had expected when they first encountered the primitive species called humans. The holographic display showed the aftermath of the battle in Earth's solar system, with wreckage from Vorthak dreadnoughts scattered across space like broken toys. The tactical analysis was clear and disturbing. The humans had not defeated the alien fleet through superior technology or clever strategy. They had won by being willing to die in ways that no civilized species could comprehend. Counselor Thesara of the Nebular Collective spoke first, her gaseous form shifting colors to indicate deep concern. She had studied warfare for 3,000 years and had never encountered a species that used suicide attacks as a primary tactical doctrine. The human behavior was not just unusual, it was incomprehensible to minds that valued individual survival above all other considerations. The insectoid. Representative Zakth clicked his mandibles in agitation as he reviewed the battle recordings. His species had conquered dozens of worlds through careful calculation of risks and benefits, always ensuring that victory came at an acceptable cost. The humans had made calculations that no rational being could understand, trading certain death for uncertain strategic advantage. Ambassador Zexathul called for order and began presenting the Council's options. The first choice was to negotiate with humanity and offer them better terms for joining galactic civilization. The second was to quarantine Earth and prevent humans from spreading to other star systems. The third was to authorize the use of planet-killing, weapons to eliminate the threat that humanity represented to civilized species throughout the galaxy. The debate that followed lasted for hours, with representatives arguing about the moral and practical implications of each option. Some members of the Council believed that humanity deserved respect for their courage and determination. Others argued that a species willing to use suicide tactics could never be safely integrated into galactic society. The final vote was close, but the decision was unanimous in its finality. Commander Veltar received authorization to use a planet-killer weapon against Earth, with the understanding that this was a regrettable but necessary response to human aggression. The weapon was already en route, traveling through hyperspace toward the Sol system. It would arrive within 72 hours and would reduce Earth to scattered asteroids within minutes of deployment. The Council sent a final message to Earth explaining their decision and offering safe passage to any humans who wished to evacuate before the planet was destroyed. The message was polite and respectful, acknowledging humanity's courage while making it clear that such behavior could not be tolerated on a galactic scale. President Santos received the alien ultimatum in the White House Situation Room, surrounded by military leaders and advisors who had been working around the clock to prepare for this moment. The message was exactly what they had expected after the battle in space. Earth had proven that humans were dangerous, and the galaxy was responding by trying to eliminate that danger completely. General Miller activated the secure communication system that connected Earth to every human colony and outpost throughout known space. The network had been built in secret over the past 3 months, using quantum entanglement technology that allowed instantaneous communication across any distance. Each human settlement had received the same equipment and the same instructions, waiting for the signal that would activate Option Zero protocols on a species-wide scale. Dr. Alex Turner sat in his laboratory beneath the Colorado mountains, surrounded by equipment that represented humanity's most advanced scientific achievements. The Phoenix Project had been his life's work, begun years before first contact with aliens as a way to preserve human knowledge and culture for future generations. Now it would serve a very different purpose. The Phoenix devices were scattered throughout human space, hidden aboard ships and stations where alien sensors would never detect them. Each device contained a complete record of human history, culture, and scientific knowledge, along with detailed genetic information that would allow other species to recreate humans if they chose to do so. The devices were designed to activate automatically if they detected the destruction of Earth, ensuring that humanity's story would survive even if no humans remained alive to tell it. Captain Tony Martinez commanded the deep space exploration vessel Horizon, currently investigating a neutron star system 300 light-years from Earth. His crew of 50 volunteers had been carefully selected for their willingness to carry out orders that would result in their certain death. The ship's cargo hold contained equipment that most humans would have considered insane to build, let alone transport across interstellar space. Commander Beth Johnson led a research expedition near the galactic core, studying the massive black hole that anchored their spiral arm. Her team had spent months preparing for this moment, calculating precisely how much antimatter would be needed to destabilize local spacetime. The mathematics were complex and the risks were enormous, but the potential results justified both the effort and the danger. Across human space, similar preparations were being completed by crews who understood that they were about to participate in the most desperate gamble in human history. Every colony, every outpost, every ship in space had been equipped with the tools necessary to ensure that humanity's destruction would come at a price that the galaxy would never forget. The planet-killer weapon dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, its massive bulk dwarfing even the largest human space stations. The device was a masterwork of alien engineering, capable of destabilizing a planet's core and reducing an entire world to rubble in a matter of minutes. It had been used successfully against 17 different worlds, and the results had always been swift and complete. Admiral Hayes watched the weapons approach from the Bridge of the Liberty, one of the few human ships that had survived the earlier battle with Commander Veltar's fleet. Her crew was skeleton small now, with most personnel having been evacuated to underground shelters or transferred to ships that were leaving the solar system. Those who remained had volunteered to witness the end of Earth and to ensure that humanity's final message reached the galaxy. The weapon began charging its primary systems, drawing energy from the vacuum of space itself through principles that human science was only beginning to understand. The process would take approximately 1 hour, during which Earth's population would have time to prepare for death or make final attempts to escape. Most humans chose to remain on their home world, understanding that running away would not save them from what was about to happen. President Santos addressed the people of Earth for what everyone knew would be the last time. She spoke from the Oval Office, with the windows behind her showing a clear view of the sky where the alien weapon was visible as a bright star that grew brighter with each passing minute. Her words were simple and direct, acknowledging that Earth was about to die while reminding humanity that death was not the end of their story. The president explained that Option 0 was now active across all human settlements, and that Earth's destruction would trigger responses that would reshape the galaxy. She did not go into details about what those responses would involve, but every human listening understood that their species had prepared for this moment. Humanity would not die quietly or alone. Dr. Turner activated the Phoenix network from his underground laboratory, sending the signal that would wake up devices scattered across hundreds of star systems. Each device began broadcasting humanity's complete historical and genetic record, along with detailed instructions for creating new humans and a simple message that would be repeated until the device's power sources failed. The message was brief, but comprehensive, explaining who humans were and what they believed in. It described Earth as a blue world, where a young species had learned to reach for the stars, and it explained that humans valued freedom above safety and determination above wisdom. The message ended with coordinates for Earth and an invitation for other species to visit the world where humanity had been born. Captain Martinez received the activation signal aboard the Horizon and began his final mission. The neutron star his ship was orbiting was perfect for his purposes, dense enough to create the reaction he needed, but unstable enough to be pushed over the edge with the right kind of intervention. His crew worked quickly and efficiently, knowing that they had perhaps an hour before the quantum effects of Earth's destruction reached their location. Commander Johnson started her own countdown near the galactic core, where the massive black hole provided both opportunity and terrible risk. The antimatter cascade she was about to trigger would tear a hole in space-time itself, creating effects that would be visible to every civilization in the galaxy. The hole would eventually heal, but not before demonstrating that humans possessed weapons that even the most advanced species feared to use. 3 months had passed since Captain Jake Morrison returned from his meeting with the Galactic Council, and Earth had been busy. The report about alien attitudes toward humanity had reached every government and military leader on the planet. President Maria Santos had called emergency meetings with leaders from every nation, and the message was clear. The aliens saw humans as primitive and harmless, which meant humanity had time to prepare for what everyone knew was coming. Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the small blue planet that hung in space ahead of his fleet. He was a Vorthak warrior, bred for conquest and trained from birth to expand his empire's territory. The planet Earth was perfect for Vorthak colonization, with clean water, breathable atmosphere, and abundant resources. The fact that it was already inhabited by a primitive species was only a minor inconvenience. His fleet consisted of 12 dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying entire cities with a single blast. The ships were works of art, as much as weapons of war, their crystal hulls gleaming with energy that could reshape matter at the atomic level. Veltar had conquered 47 worlds in his career, and most of them had surrendered after seeing just one of his ships. He expected this conquest to be even easier than usual. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood in the command center of the USS Liberty, watching her screens as the alien fleet approached Earth's solar system. She was a veteran of 3 wars and had spent her entire career preparing for battles that might never come. Now the biggest battle in human history was approaching, and she felt strangely calm. Her fleet consisted of 30 ships, all of them built using the best technology Earth could produce in 3 months of desperate work. The human ships looked primitive compared to the alien vessels, but Lisa knew that appearances could be deceiving. Every ship in her fleet had been modified with systems that the aliens had never seen before, because the aliens had never fought an enemy like humanity. Lisa had studied every piece of information that Jake Morrison had brought back from his meeting with the Galactic Council, and she had noticed something important that the aliens had missed. Commander Veltar opened a communication channel to the human fleet and broadcast his message in several languages. His voice was calm and professional as he explained that the Vorthak Empire was claiming the Sol system for colonization. The humans had 24 hours to evacuate the planet Earth, and any ships that remained after that time would be destroyed. He offered safe passage to any human vessels that wished to relocate to other star systems, though he made it clear that this was a one-time offer. Lisa Hayes listened to the ultimatum and felt a cold anger settling in her chest. She had been expecting something like this ever since Jake's report, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. The aliens were not interested in negotiation or compromise. They wanted Earth, and they believed that humans would simply give it to them because the alternative was death. She opened her own communication channel and responded to Veltar with a voice that remained steady despite the rage she felt inside. She thanked him for his message and explained that humanity would need some time to consider his generous offer. In the meantime, she hoped that both fleets could maintain their current positions to avoid any unfortunate accidents. Veltar found this response amusing. The human admiral was trying to buy time, probably hoping that the Galactic Council would intervene on behalf of the primitive species. He had seen this behavior before with other young races, and it never worked. The Council had already approved this colonization mission, understanding that some species needed to be relocated for the greater good of galactic civilization. While the 2 fleets maintained their positions, Colonel Pete Johnson was leading a covert mission that neither the aliens nor most of the human fleet knew about. Pete commanded a stealth ship that used technology borrowed from several different sources, including some ideas that human scientists had developed after studying Jake's recordings of alien technology. The ship was invisible to most sensors, and small enough to avoid detection even by the advanced alien vessels. Pete's mission was simple in concept, but terrifying in execution. He needed to get close enough to the alien ships to plant monitoring devices that would let humanity understand exactly what they were dealing with. The devices were tiny, no bigger than coins, but they contained quantum processors that could analyze alien technology and transmit the information back to Earth. The stealth mission took 6 hours, during which Pete and his team moved from one alien ship to another like ghosts in the darkness. The Vorthak vessels were impressive up close, their hulls covered with energy patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living things. Pete planted his devices and retreated, but not before his sensors recorded something that made his blood run cold. The alien ships were not just equipped for conquest. They carried equipment for strip mining entire planets, devices for processing large populations of prisoners, and weapons designed specifically for destroying cities while leaving the surrounding countryside intact. This was not a military conquest aimed at forcing surrender. This was the beginning of a systematic exploitation that would strip Earth of everything valuable and turn humanity into a slave species. Pete transmitted his findings back to Admiral Hayes, who shared them with the Emergency Command Council on Earth. President Santos looked at the data and felt sick to her stomach. The aliens were not just taking Earth away from humanity, they were planning to turn the planet into a resource extraction site and the human population into unpaid workers, who would spend the rest of their lives serving alien masters. General Frank Miller stood up from the conference table and walked to a secure terminal. He entered a series of codes that he had hoped never to use, and a file appeared on the main screen. The file was labeled Option 0 and contained protocols that had been developed in secret by a small group of military planners who understood that some threats might be too terrible to face with conventional responses. The room fell silent as President Santos read through the Option 0 protocols. The plans were comprehensive and terrifying, covering scenarios where humanity faced complete extinction or permanent enslavement. The protocols were based on a simple principle that every human leader understood, but none of them liked to think about. If humanity was going to die, it would not die quietly. Back in space, Admiral Hayes received new orders from Earth. The 24-hour deadline was approaching, and Veltar was preparing to attack any human ships that remained in the system. Lisa opened a final communication channel to the alien commander and delivered humanity's official response to his ultimatum. Her voice was calm and respectful as she thanked Veltar for his patience and explained that humanity had reached a decision. Earth would not be evacuated, and the human fleet would not withdraw from the solar system. She paused for a moment before delivering the final part of her message, words that had been carefully chosen by President Santos and the Emergency Council. Lisa told Veltar that he did not understand what he was dealing with, and that this was his last chance to withdraw his fleet and find somewhere else to expand his empire. She said this without threats or anger, just a simple statement of fact that carried the weight of an entire species behind it. Veltar received this message and felt a mixture of amusement and irritation. The human admiral was still trying to bluff with a fleet that was outnumbered and outgunned by ratios that made resistance pointless. He had offered them a chance to leave peacefully, and they had chosen to fight instead. This was their choice, and the consequences would be their responsibility. The alien commander gave the order to attack, and his 12 dreadnoughts began charging their primary weapons. The energy buildup was visible from Earth as points of light that grew brighter and brighter in the darkness of space. Veltar expected the human fleet to scatter or surrender once they saw the overwhelming power that was about to be unleashed against them. Instead, the human ships began moving toward the alien fleet. Lisa Hayes had given her own orders, and every captain in the human fleet understood what was expected of them. They were not going to run away or beg for mercy. They were going to fight, and they were going to use tactics that the aliens had never seen before, because the aliens had never fought an enemy that was willing to sacrifice everything for victory. Captain Danny Clark commanded the destroyer Defiance, and he was the first human to demonstrate what Option 0 really meant. Instead of trying to match the aliens' superior firepower, Danny aimed his ship directly at the nearest Vorthak dreadnought and pushed his engines to maximum power. His crew had volunteered for this mission, understanding that they would not be going home. The Defiance struck the alien ship's reactor core at a significant fraction of light speed, and the explosion that followed lit up the solar system like a new star being born. 3 Vorthak vessels were destroyed instantly, and 2 more were crippled by the expanding wave of energy and debris. Veltar watched in horror as his supposedly overwhelming fleet was reduced by nearly half in the space of a few seconds. Similar attacks were happening all across the battlefield. Commander Kelly White detonated her ship's ammunition supply while docked inside an alien vessel. Major Rick Torres used his... The human ship moved slowly toward the massive space station that hung in the dark void like a crystal flower. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the alien structure grow larger on the main screen. The station was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly. It seemed to be made of pure light and glass that twisted in impossible shapes. "First time seeing a Zephyrian station, sir?" asked Commander Ryan Brooks as he walked up beside his captain. His uniform was crisp, and his hand rested easily on his weapon belt. Jake nodded and kept watching the screen. "Intelligence briefings don't do it justice," he said quietly. "Look at those spires. They're spinning without any visible support." Dr. Lisa Carter moved to join them at the front of the bridge. She carried a datapad filled with notes about the alien species they were about to meet. Her eyes were bright with excitement behind her glasses. "The Zephyrians evolved on a world with gravity about 1/3 of Earth's," she explained. "Their entire civilization developed around manipulating gravitational fields and energy patterns. What we're seeing isn't just architecture, it's art and science combined." Ambassador Nicole Torres smoothed her diplomatic robes and checked her translation device one more time. This meeting could change everything for humanity. The Zephyrians controlled this entire sector of space and had technology that could help human colonies expand further into the galaxy. "Remember, everyone," she said in her calm, diplomatic voice. "We're here to make friends and hopefully trading partners. First impressions matter." The communication system crackled to life with sounds like wind chimes and flowing water. The translation device worked hard to turn the musical alien language into words humans could understand. "Human vessel Aurora's Dawn, you are cleared for docking Bay 7. Please follow the guidance beams and do not deviate from the prescribed path." Jake watched as streams of soft blue light appeared in space around their ship. The beams formed a tunnel that led directly to one of the station's docking ports. "Navigation follow those beams exactly," he ordered. "Communications send our thanks for the guidance and confirm we understand the docking procedures." As their ship moved along the light tunnel, Jake could see other vessels docked at the station. All of them had the same flowing crystal design. They looked more like sculptures than spaceships. None of them showed any signs of the heavy armor plating or massive engines that human ships required. "Sir," called the navigation officer, "I'm reading some unusual energy signatures from the station. It's like the whole structure is alive with power flowing through it." Dr. Carter looked at her scanner readings and frowned. "The energy levels are incredible, but they're not coming from any engines or reactors I can identify. It's almost like the station itself is generating power just by existing." The docking process was smoother than any the crew had ever experienced. Instead of the usual clanking and grinding of metal against metal, their ship simply slid into place as if guided by invisible hands. Soft lights appeared along the docking tube that connected their airlock to the station. "Atmospheric readings show breathable air in the docking tube," reported the science officer. "Gravity is at about 30% of Earth normal. Temperature is comfortable for humans." Jake turned to his diplomatic team. "Everyone ready?" he asked. "Remember, we're representing all of humanity here. These aliens have never met humans before, and everything we do will shape their opinion of our entire species." Ambassador Torres nodded and gathered her diplomatic bag. "Dr. Carter, you'll be our scientific consultant. Commander Brooks, your security, but try to look friendly. Captain Morrison, you're in command, but let me do most of the talking." The four humans made their way to the airlock. When it opened, they stepped into a corridor that seemed to be made of living light. The walls pulsed gently with soft colors, and the floor felt warm beneath their feet. Everything was sized for beings much taller than humans, but the proportions felt strange and delicate. A group of aliens waited for them at the end of the corridor. The humans stopped walking for a moment just to stare. The Zephyrians were tall and impossibly graceful. Their skin looked like it was made of crystal that caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. They moved like dancers floating through water. The alien in the center of the group stepped forward. She wore robes that seemed to be made of captured starlight and a crown that floated just above her head without touching. When she spoke, her voice was like music played on crystal bells. "Welcome, human visitors. I am Princess Veleth, heir to the Zephyrian throne and guardian of this system. We have traveled far to meet you and learn about your species." Ambassador Torres bowed in the formal diplomatic manner. "Your Highness, we are honored by your welcome. I am Ambassador Nicole Torres, representing the United Human Colonies. This is Captain Jake Morrison, commander of our vessel, Dr. Lisa Carter, our chief scientist, and Commander Ryan Brooks, our security chief." Princess Veleth looked at each human in turn. Her eyes were like liquid silver and seemed to see everything. When she looked at Commander Brooks, her gaze lingered on his muscular frame and the weapons he carried. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. "How interesting," she said in her musical voice. "Your species appears to be quite different from what we expected. Your bodies are so dense and heavy-looking, and those crude muscle structures. Do all humans look so bulky and primitive?" Some of the other Zephyrians made sounds like silver laughter. Dr. Carter felt her cheeks warm, but kept her expression neutral. Ambassador Torres smiled diplomatically and chose her words carefully. "Humans come in many different shapes and sizes, Your Highness. We evolved on a world quite different from yours. Perhaps those differences will make our species good partners for trade and cooperation." Princess Veleth nodded, but her smile grew wider. "Yes. I suppose when a species cannot manipulate gravity or energy fields, they must develop other compensations. Brute physical force, perhaps. How charmingly primitive." The musical laughter from the other aliens grew louder. Jake felt his jaw tighten, but kept his face calm. This was not starting the way they had hoped. "Come," said Princess Veleth with a graceful gesture. "Let us show you our station. Perhaps you will find our more evolved approach to technology educational." The group began moving deeper into the station, following corridors that curved and twisted in directions that seemed impossible. Everything around them hummed with power and beauty. The humans walked carefully in the low gravity, while the aliens flowed beside them like living art. This was going to be a long diplomatic mission.